Hey folks, I'm Matt and welcome to the Good Trouble Show. Congress knows the Pentagon and the CIA are hiding what they know about UAPs, otherwise known as UFOs. This from Republican Senator Mike Rounds.
This is an issue that I think has caught the attention of the American people, and most certainly the lack of transparency on the matter, which is of real interest to a lot of the folks that have watched from the outside. We wanted to take that same approach with regard to how we could dispel myths, misinformation about UAPs, about unidentified flying objects, unidentified objects that simply have come to the attention of the American people.
Last year, Congress attempted to pass the UAP Disclosure Act of 2023, forcing the CIA and the Pentagon to reveal to Congress what they know about UAPs. Now, unfortunately, the military-industrial complex flexed its muscles, and the act was gutted last year by Republican Mike Turner. The bill has been reintroduced as the UAP Disclosure Act of 2024, sponsored again by Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer and Republican Senator Mike Rounds, and co-sponsored by Senators Heinrich and Gillibrand. Today we have two guests from organizations that are fighting to get this legislation through the finish line. But first, please hit the subscribe and thumbs up buttons on YouTube. Leave a comment and let us know what you think about this episode. You can also find us on X at Good Trouble Show and everywhere else at The Good Trouble Show. You can also find us wherever you enjoy your podcasts. Search for The Good Trouble Show with Matt Ford. And as always, we need your help keeping the lights on. You can become a Patreon member of The Good Trouble Show by going to www.patreon.com/The Good Trouble Show. Sign up and you can support our work. And moving on here, we have two great guests. Our next guests are at the forefront of the fight for UAP transparency. Please welcome Yuan Feng, the Executive Director of the UAP Disclosure Fund, and please welcome Lester Nare of UAP Caucus. Gentlemen, how are you?
Doing great, Matt.
Doing
Excellent.
well. Great to be back.
Excellent. Glad to have you both back. So, Lester, let's start with you. Tell the viewers at home about your organization, UAP Caucus, and its efforts to help get us to the finish line on this legislation.
Yeah, so we created UAP Caucus as a volunteer organization focused on increasing sort of transparency and declassification in government around the subject of UAP, while also providing technical and operational support for a variety of research organizations that are studying the subject of UAP, such as the AIAA, the American Institute for Aeronautics and Astronautics, which is the largest aerospace trade organization in the world, and they have a UAP integration and outreach committee that is an example of some of the types of organizations that we support. So again, both on the disclosure and the research discovery side of the equation.
So, Yuan, you are the Executive Director of the UAP Disclosure Fund, which is new to the space. Tell us a bit about the organization and what you guys are doing to help get us over the finish line with the UAP Disclosure Act as well.
Sure. We are a nonpartisan nonprofit that advocates for greater government transparency regarding UAP, and we seek to increase public awareness of the issue. And we're going to do so by working to build public support for political actions, to work directly with Congress and lawmakers to get them to care more about the issue and to increase public awareness. We've assembled a high-powered board of directors and advisory board that includes Lou Elizondo, Garry Nolan, Karl Nell, Christopher Mellon, and Kirk McConnel. And we're also in the process of building an exceptional executive team. As many in your audience know, we launched at the beginning of June with a petition drive to advocate for the inclusion of the UAPDA in the 2025 NDAA. And we had over 10,000 people from all over the world sign the petition. Last month, we hand-delivered it to the Senate offices in DC, and we were pleased to learn that Schumer himself, Senator Schumer, viewed the petition and was very appreciative of the support. And now, as we look forward to the rest of the year, we're focused on everything we can do moving forward to continue to advocate for the passage of the UAPDA. And members of our board have been working recently behind the scenes in Congress to build that support and build support for the legislation and continue to advocate for the issue.
Now, this is a question for both of you. Why should the American voter care about the UAP issue? Lester, let's start with you.
Yeah, I think it's important to remember that regardless of the ultimate origins of UAP, we have vehicles of unknown origin that are allegedly flying over both civilian and military airspace over the continental US and globally. And we are not being told what that is. And it is obviously something that the American people deserve to know. So not only from a flight safety or national security perspective, there's also the concern around the misappropriation of funds related to these programs that don't have congressional oversight. So in a time period when we're talking about threats to democracy, this seems to be a subject where both on the national security, aviation safety, and misappropriation of funds angle, it's an extremely relevant and important thing for all American people.
Indeed, I couldn't agree more. Yuan, how about you?
Sure. I'd like to echo what Lester just said, that the UAP issue is something, as it relates to Congress and what we're dealing with UAP transparency, it really does get to the core of our American democracy. Our Constitution is clear. Congress should have complete oversight over the executive branch and understand fully how taxpayer dollars are spent. And it appears that that has not been the case with alleged secret programs looking into UAP, and the overclassification that prevents Congress from understanding what's happening, and the public as well, also has an effect on our ability as a society to make decisions about what our government's priorities should be and how our taxpayer dollars should be spent. So, getting to the bottom of that is important. And as the national security side is also important. We have, today and recently we have reports of incursions over nuclear facilities, sensitive facilities, and secured airspace. And while many in Congress are comfortable calling these drones instead of UAP, nevertheless, there are objects in our skies that we need to address. And so that's another key part of why our government needs to take this seriously.
Absolutely. Now, folks at home may not realize this, but Congress has already enacted federal legislation on UAPs, UFOs over the past few years. Lester, if you wouldn't mind, walk us through what is now federal law that, thanks to members of Congress, we have stuff on the books regarding UAP.
Yeah, no, not a problem, actually. So there's a couple things. I actually have a list here in my notes. So this kind of all started in part with classified briefings that were happening in Congress starting as early as 2019. As congressional interest increased, that led to the creation of the UAP task force within the Department of Defense in 2020. Part of the DoD was attempting to front run Congress mandating the creation of something for the Department of Defense. So in 2020, you had the UAPTF. In 2021, we passed legislation in the NDAA for fiscal year 2022 for the creation of the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, or AARO, which is now the new public permanent Pentagon office with sort of two mandates: one, to collate all of the data across different compartments within the DoD to get a better understanding of what the DoD knew about the subject, and then facilitate a public-facing, website and sort of communicate some of those findings that are, not relevant to internal processes to the public. After AARO in 2021, we saw in 2022 the passage of expanded whistleblower protections for UAP-specific whistleblowers, in addition to a mandate for a historical report to be created by AARO, as well as the first sort of public hearing in the House and the subcommittee. 2023, we had two hearings, one in the Senate, one in the House, both in subcommittees, as well as addition of a couple of new pieces of legislation prior to the UAPDA's passing, which primarily was focused on the limitation of funding for unreported UAP programs. So this is sort of really in the weeds, tangible legislation that's been happening over the last 4 years, not only around the creation of the office of AARO, around increasing whistleblower protections, but also on limiting the funding for UAP programs, which again dovetails back to my note earlier, which is a big part of this conversation is around looking towards if there is sort of waste, fraud, and abuse or misappropriation of funds happening, both on its face and if it's being used to hide or cover up the existence of potentially non-prosaic materials that have been recovered by the US government. So that's just sort of a list of the things that have been done outside of what was partially passed as a part of the UAPDA at the end of 2023.
So, I mean, really, if you think about it, it's pretty amazing. It's consecutive years that we have had UAP legislation passed. I mean, that's we just had Nick Gold on the show earlier, and as he was really rightfully pointing out, it is a series of wins, and I know it's very easy for everyone to get discouraged. You know, we all want the big home run. But if you think about it, we've really come a very, very long way in a very short period of time. And what are your thoughts on that, Lester? It seems like we're doing pretty well.
I think one of the things people need to recognize is understanding the time scale of policy. If you even just look at any other industry that is nascent, new, or has not yet established policy frameworks, such as artificial intelligence, AI, or crypto, both of those industries have not had 5 years of consecutive legislation that have been meant to sort of deal with the increasing issues related to both, partly because of lack of interest and partly because of lack of agreement. We have both a sufficient level of interest and a sufficient level of agreement to be able to have that, again, consecutive building on top of each other set of legislation for this subject matter. And you'd be hard pressed to find another nascent or non-mainstream subject that has had that level of consistent policy success in Congress in the 117th and 118th Congresses.
Now, Yuan, you've worked in politics for quite some time, and one of the things that I've noted with people that are asking, well, why are they doing all of this, is in terms of Congress putting forth this legislation. Members of Congress, they are spending significant political capital doing this. This isn't like some kind of topic that doesn't have a lot of stigma. This topic, very, very stigmatized. There is a very long history of the United States government lying to Congress and the American people about this. But my larger point is, if there was nothing to this, if this was just maybe they think something is going on, I can't imagine that they would spend their political capital and resources to put forth all of this legislation that we've seen so far, plus this new act. What are your thoughts on that, Yuan?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think that the very fact that we see the Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer's name on this legislation and as Senior Senator Mike Rounds 2 years in a row tells us a lot about how seriously they're taking this, and also the fact that they have the security clearances where they've seen evidence that is classified, and there's something there that is compelling them to put their names on one of the most significant pieces of legislation in American history that mentions non-human intelligence so many times, and they've spoken publicly on the Senate floor about the fact that they see evidence of some cover-up that we need to get to the bottom of. And they've expressed the fact that the American public has a right to know about technologies of unknown origin. So it's clear to me that they wouldn't be doing this on a whim. So I think that tells us that there's something real to pursue. And it is people like Lou Elizondo and David Grush and others coming forward as whistleblowers, many who we haven't learned publicly who they are yet, but they've presented evidence to members of Congress over the last few years. And, I think the senators and some Congress members of the House of Representatives, they've been convinced at this point that there's something worthy of investigation, misappropriation of funds, important potentially scientific breakthroughs that may have been hidden away in compartmentalized programs to this point. And so something of this magnitude, obviously, we at the UAP Disclosure Fund and everybody involved in disclosure we're all of the opinion that this is too important. It's too important of a topic to hide from the American people, and it's high time that the secret of the existence potentially of non-human intelligence be shared with the American public, so we can make decisions about how to proceed.
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it is high time indeed. Now, Lester, at the top of the show, of course, I spoke about last year's UAP Disclosure Act. What was in that? And we know stuff was pulled out of it. So what was in the 2023 version, and what survived? What passed?
So in the 2023 version of the UAPDA, there was significant portions of it that were still passed, which included the creation of the UAP records collection at the National Archives, which is now publicly available online and already has a small tranche of documents that from previous things that have been populated into it, as well as the deadline for the targeted agencies. There were originally 24 agencies across the federal government that were targeted to produce their UAP records. The upcoming deadline to begin the production and submission of those to NARA is coming up in October. They also passed the automatic 25-year declassification. So all UAP records that are older than 25 years old have a presumption of declassification, and there needs to be a justification provided for their continued classification. And they also passed the parameters for the grounds for postponement of the release of these records to the public in the short term. Now, these are, the 25-year declassification, the collection itself, the requirement to do the reporting. These are all tangible, positive steps forward. The problem becomes they put all that in there without any of the mechanisms to have accountability to the agencies to actually fulfill the requirements that were set out in the UAPDA. So it's sort of like a self-reporting system as opposed to a system with an enforcement authority that has subpoena power and can provide effectively an amnesty program for whistleblowers, which continues to be what we hear as a key piece, again, because we have not been able to drive voluntary disclosure in the past. That is a primary reason why the UAPDA included the 9-member independent review board that had a presidential appointment and Senate confirmation, again, being bestowed with subpoena power such that there can be the right to compel the production of these documents and records.
And so essentially, what is in the current version of the UAP Disclosure Act of 2024? What elements are in that one as opposed to what was in the previous one?
So what is interesting, and I'm going to take a quick road trip detour. This year, the UAPDA was introduced in both the House and the Senate. Last year, the UAPDA was only introduced in the Senate. Representative Garcia from California is the one who proposed or introduced a version of the UAPDA in the House that did not make it into the House's version of the NDAA. That's not because it was explicitly voted on. It didn't even get a chance to be voted on. But that version, Garcia's version, removed some of the pieces of the original UAPDA that have already been enacted. In the Senate version of the UAPDA for 2024, the one that's current, it is an almost carbon copy of the original UAPDA of 2023, including the clauses for the creation of the records collection, for the 25-year automatic declassification, for the grounds for postponement. And they added a clause which effectively stated that the 2024 version supersedes or overwrites anything that was passed in the NDAA last year. So there's likely going to be some, they don't need to recreate the records collection. They don't need to reestablish the 25-year mark. But I think the point was they wanted it all intact together as a part of what will eventually become the negotiation process.
Got it. And my understanding is part of this manager's package that they've put in there. that has to pass unanimously, correct?
This is correct. And we actually put out a small explainer video with the help of the UAP Disclosure Fund around where the process is now for the current UAPDA in the Senate. And very briefly, partly because of the congressional schedule this year, things are a little bit compressed. There's also the natural gamesmanship and political positioning that happens around this time of the year. What is likely going to happen, which was the same thing as last year, is that the UAPDA, alongside the Intelligence Authorization Act and another set of amendments, will be packaged together in what is called the manager's package, and that will be brought to the floor, the full floor of the Senate, for a vote. And the idea is that that vote has to approve all of the elements that are contained within the manager's package, of which one component is the UAPDA. So there's currently the negotiation happening right now for what should be included in that manager's package. And the focus right now is making sure that the UAPDA, alongside those other amendments, is included and brought to the floor for a vote. It is likely to be the case that if the UAPDA makes it into the package, the manager's package should be successfully approved by the Senate, at which point we go to the sort of conference committee process where we'll see the Senate and the House collaboratively negotiating over what's going to make it into the unified version of the NDAA. This is where last year we saw the pushback arise from some of the leadership on the armed services and intel committees within the House. There are some different dynamics at play this year, so it will be interesting to see if we are able to successfully get the UAPDA into the Senate's version and we move on to that process. For a whole variety of reasons, the conference committee process will potentially look different than last year's. So there could be a little bit of a change of path to success because of the larger dynamics of the election year political environment.
And Yuan, there is no guarantee that this is going to pass unanimously in the Senate, correct? And yes or no? Is that this isn't a done deal as far as on the Senate side?
That's correct. One of the things about the manager's package is that it's pre-negotiated. So what's happening at this time, we know behind closed doors, is that negotiation of what will be included in the manager's package. That way that when it gets to the Senate floor, it's an up or down vote that has to pass, and it at that point it's pre-negotiated, and it's going to pass. They won't bring it to the floor unless it's going to pass. So right now it is the committees, the Armed Services Committee, the Intelligence Committee, the Homeland Security and Government Affairs Committee that are doing that negotiation, and that's why we're advocating for people to call these offices. We're underway with engaging with a letter writing campaign that folks can be a part of if they sign up on our website. But we want to target the key senators who are the chairs and co-chairs of these committees and make our support for the UAP Disclosure Act known.
And what are some other ways? So you mentioned the letter writing and whatnot. What are some other things that our viewers at home can do to encourage the senators to pass this thing?
Sure,
I can touch on this really quick, actually, because in addition to what is the UAPDF is really pushing forward, we also have updated our call tool on uapcaucus.com/call to include the entire memberships of all three committees, including the leadership, as well as call scripts and a background on the UAPDA. So you can use one touch to call. It's very easy. It's very simple. Everyone is there and it's searchable. So you can also look for, the senator that might be in your particular location. Being a constituent is hugely valuable in terms of the import of the calls that you make. And we also just released a new explainer guide for the UAPDA that walks through all of the 60 pages of legislation in simple terms, very easy to navigate. And that can be a guide that can help viewers better understand the details of the legislation and understand what it is they're asking for their senators to advocate for.
And Yuan, it's important that we let the senators, particularly Rounds and Schumer, and Gillibrand and Heinrich, it's important, would you agree, for people at home to let these senators know that we are grateful that they have done what they promised. So following the gutting of the amendment last year, Schumer and Rounds essentially said, we're going to do this again. And they followed through with their promise, and they've delivered. And I think, would you not agree that it's important that people reach out to them in particular and say thank you for that?
Yes, absolutely. That was, in fact, what our initial petition when we launched a couple of months ago. It was in support of the senators who had sponsored and co-sponsored the UAP Disclosure Act of 2023. And moving forward, it's important that we recognize that any lawmaker who has signed on to legislation, is co-sponsoring it, is publicly supporting it, they are doing a great service towards transparency. And as you mentioned earlier, it can come at a political cost, and they're spending some political capital. And so it's really important that we support them and not be critical of their efforts. Support is how we give lawmakers at this time, I believe, top cover for what they're doing. They have a lot of momentum internally in Congress to do an investigation, to want to know what's been happening that's in the executive branch that it's been hidden from them. But we in the public side, as we build our nascent public, our political movement, initially our best tool is to support the lawmakers and support legislation and message that to lawmakers. Down the road, if the political movement is larger and we have more power, we can. That's when we would have the influence that would caution lawmakers who are against transparency. But at this time, it's really important for us to focus on the support aspect of our political actions.
Couldn't agree more.
Can I piggyback
Please.
on that really quick? Because I think another important part about this is understanding where we are in the political cycle generally, which is moving from the 118th Congress to the 119th Congress beginning in 2025. And what that's going to mean is there could be the potential change of party control of each chamber, the House or the Senate, as well as the changing of the guard of leadership on committees. So there is going to be potentially, again, a new foundation and fresh ground with totally different players that are in control of the power and the dynamics within Congress. And to the extent that we are showing support and helping drive the momentum for continued support for legislation, as those committee leaderships and power dynamics change, it maximizes our ability to continue that momentum with a new group of people and new dynamics that are existing within Congress. So it's also this transition between the 118th and 119th can potentially be a circumstance where the momentum gets killed because the power of the chambers and the leadership changes, and the people that get put in place are not as sympathetic to the issue. So it is paramount that we, again, continue to lift up those that are pushing for continued transparency and declassification, because that will then make it more likely that we can have that momentum continue going into the 119th Congress.
We definitely need the momentum, that is for sure. Yuan, how can the folks at home support your work at UAP Disclosure Fund?
Yeah, we encourage everybody who's watching the show to visit uapdisclosurefund.org and sign up for updates. And as we move forward, we're going to let folks know as we reach these important moments where it's important for us to take action, that now's the time. And then we'll give guidance as to what those actions should be. And moving forward, we have a lot more things planned for disclosure in general. We're very focused on the UAP Disclosure Act this year because it's a huge piece of what we want to do, what everybody wants to do for disclosure. But there are also aspects like public awareness of UAP and education, and we're going to be working in those areas as well. So we hope everybody will sign up, and that way we can let you know what we're doing as we go forward.
Lester, how about you at UAP Caucus?
The number one thing people can do is go to uapcaucus.com/call and contact your senators to support the UAPDA as part of the Senate's version of the NDAA. And the second thing people can do is go to uapcaucus.com/UAPDA and share our UAPDA guide with a friend, with a family member, with a coworker, post it on Reddit, on your Twitter, in your Slack at work. It is a great way for people to really understand the scope and the magnitude of what is being proposed out of Congress.
Absolutely love that. Well, gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us. And hopefully next time we have you guys on, this will have cleared the Senate and we'll be talking about what we need to do in the House.
Indeed. Pleasure. Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. Okay. Yuan Feng and Lester Nare, thanks for joining us. I tell you what, now is definitely the time to make this happen. And I hope everyone will do their part, make your voice heard in getting this over the finish line. Americans, all of us in the U.S. and certainly in the world, we deserve to know. We should all be demanding the truth. And folks, if you enjoyed our show, we would appreciate it if you hit the subscribe and thumbs up button, leave a comment, and please tell your friends about us on social media. You can help us grow the show. We will see you soon on The Good Trouble Show.